And there we are. Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the second in AAUW Diversity Committee's Racism Discussion Series. The acronym AAUW stands for American Association of University Women. Our organization was founded in 1881 with a mission to advance equity for women and girls. We believe that equity for women and girls will bring equity for all people. And so this racism discussion series is really quite mission driven for us in AAUW. In our plan today, we will be using some of Zoom's bells and whistles, particularly anonymous polling and breakout rooms. So let me give you a little bit of instruction to make sure we're all on the same page. We then are going to do a quick polling about white privilege, and we will then introduce Dr. Peggy McIntosh, who will lead our discussion today, breaking us out into smaller groups and bringing us back for a debriefing afterwards. So, that said, we need to see the discussion ground rules. These are very similar to the ones that we had last month. I would like to, as you read them, draw your attention particularly to the emphasis on describing your experiences rather than your opinions here today. And to, in the discussion of white privilege, avoid blame, shame, guilt, or preaching. Hard to do, I know. Here is our procedure. When you wish to speak, you will raise your electronic hand. When you are recognized, we will unmute your microphone. And when you are finished speaking, we will remute your microphone and lower your electronic hand. We apologize for the control freak image that we are putting forth here, but we discovered that leaving it the way we had it last time was a little bit confusing. Jackie, did I get it wrong?
The one thing what you'll do, when we unmute you, you're going to get a little message that asks you to unmute yourself. And usually what we're going to do is you'll be unmuted before the speaker before you, so that when they're finished, you can just go next, all right? So when you raise your hand, when we're ready to call on you, we're going to send you a message that says, please unmute yourself. That's the one thing you have to do. After that, don't touch it.
Thank you. Thank you. Last reminder, the microphones are off, so we can't hear you and noise in your background, but the cameras are on unless you've stopped yours. Everyone sees everything. Any person who participated in our first meeting last month who would like to share or reflect on new awarenesses, new learnings, realizations, things that you have noticed as a result of that discussion that you had not noticed before. So if you are interested in participating, raise your hand.
Your electronic hand.
Your electronic hand.
Mm-hmm.
Very well. That just gave us a whole lot more time for our discussion today. Jackie, you're on with our anonymous polling.
Okay. You'll see this is going to come up. Now, if you would please, you all should see this, and all you have to do is click on one of the answers.
Yes, no, or never thought about it.
Exactly.
Is everyone seeing the poll? Cool.
Yes.
This was going to turn out, but you can see that just under half of us had heard of this before, but more than half had never even thought about it, which I think previews what should be a really interesting discussion. Toward that end, let me now take the pleasure of introducing Dr. Peggy McIntosh. Dr. McIntosh is the founder and senior associate at the SEED project. SEED stands for, help me out, Peggy, I have it written down, but I don't have it in front of me.
Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, SEED.
SEED project, and she is a senior researcher at the Wellesley Women's Centers. And many of you, or some of you, may have been aware of Dr. McIntosh's work. Decades ago, when I was teaching at the university level, we used the piece that you read for today in our classes with graduate students. It was important for them to understand the context in which they would be working. So without further ado, Dr. McIntosh, welcome. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate being with you, and I am impressed that AAUW of the Villages has decided to do this series of discussions. Good for you. Discussions over time. This is often slow work. Now, Linda, I have a technical question.
Yes, ma'am.
On my screen, the poll is still showing.
I think you need to close it by clicking on the X in the upper right-hand corner.
Okay. Because normally I would, yes, now I'm seeing you.
Okay.
That's good. I like the numbers, but I like the people too. The question I have been most asked about my white privilege work is, how did you come to see white privilege? And I enjoy answering that question, and I hope it'll be relevant to a number of you. If not all, it just has to do with being very surprised at very nice men. I was leading seminars for faculty members in the New England area at Wellesley Centers for Women for 7 years in the late 70s, early 80s. Our seminar subject was bringing materials on women into the liberal arts curriculum, into those courses you all took as women in your universities. In every field, the question was raised by me. I was the facilitator. How can we make women visible as half the world's population and as having had half the world's lived experience in all of the academic disciplines that we are teaching the next generation in the universities today? The people who joined the seminars that I did numbered about 22. They came from colleges and universities all over the Boston area, and also some from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. They would come to Wellesley for 5 hours a month, and throughout an academic year, we would discuss their disciplines and their specialties and how women might be made visible. The men who joined these seminars were brave men. They were teased on their own campuses for joining a feminist project at a women's college. They came nevertheless faithfully, and they were great events. We had a long waiting list. 22 places wasn't enough. Each year, there was quite a long waiting list to get into the next year. So all was going along pretty well, but I noticed there was a sort of social distancing between the men and the women from about February through to the end of the seminar in May. We had started in great shape, and at dinner everybody wanted to sit with everybody else, and gradually, month by month, the men wanted to sit with each other. And in some cases, I suppose the women wanted to sit with each other. I thought I must be doing something wrong to make the gender relations, the male-female relationships, get sour during the course of these monthly meetings on scholarship on women. But I wanted more money to continue the series, so I thought I must confess to the funder, Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, that my facilitation skills lacked something, so that the conversation on bringing women into the curriculum didn't always go smoothly. And I thought what I would do before I wrote the proposal was I would go through my notes, find out what I could about what I had done wrong, and confess it to the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that it was a great seminar. We had a waiting list always. However, my facilitation skills needed to be a little better with regard to gender divides. And if they would give me another $325,000, I would mend my ways. So I'm looking through my notes. What did I do to make the women and men not like each other so much? And I found I hadn't actually done anything wrong. It's that men, these wonderful men who were brave enough to undertake the seminar, were inadvertently insulting to us. For example, I found in my notes that one of the women, they were all professors, they were all experienced in their fields. One of the women said, "Why can't we get this material on women as half the world's population into the first year courses?" And a very nice man explained, in those introductory courses, I'd written it all down carefully, you are laying the foundation blocks for knowledge. And when you're laying the foundation blocks for knowledge in those introductory courses, you can't put in soft stuff. You can't put in soft stuff. Now, we had been reading many hardback books, journal articles from refereed journals. Mm. Everybody had been doing this, and the men had too, in good faith and gladly. They said the seminar was fascinating and helping them to get tenure as well. But this very nice man who explained why you couldn't put women in at the beginning told us, inadvertently, he told us that he still considered all this hard scholarship to be soft. And it's a key thing to me that none of us said anything, none of us women. So there were 7 men and 15 women. None of us said anything, nor did the men. And we passed on to other things. And I'm grateful to him now because he had tipped his hand and showed us that he thought all this material on women was basically soft. And this reminds me of the book that was called Men Are From Mars, Women are from Venus. Venus is soft, right? Then 2 years later, I found in my notes another instance of this, the inadvertent insult. It was that another woman had raised a similar question. She said, you were all talking about your senior seminar in which people make a feminist critique of the field that they have majored in, but that's too late. Can't we have all of these materials put in at the beginning instead of having to wait for a senior seminar in which you retrospectively say, yeah, come to think of it, we didn't study women at all. One very nice man, explained in a gentle way that the trouble with that idea of putting women in at the beginning of college courses is, these are his words, which I wrote down. That year, the students are choosing their majors, and their major is their discipline. And if you want a person to think in a disciplined way, you can't put in extras. You can't put in extras. Now, once again, not a single person in the room objected to the idea that we women, we half of her world's population, are extra. And it began to occur to me in the following days. Well, the man who said that, and he's a really nice man, he was born of a woman. What has been done to his mind to make him think that she's extra? And come to think of it, all of us who were in the seminar room were born of a woman. And come to think of it, everybody in the whole world is born of a woman. What has been done to the mind of this very nice man to make him think that our half of the world's population is extra? Because these men are so nice. They're so engaged in the seminar. And they're saying these things, and we women are not responding to say, ouch. And what is your mother really extra? None of us were saying these things. And then I thought, okay, maybe I don't have to put the question to myself this way, are these nice men or are they oppressive men? I knew they were nice and brave. And I was feeling them as oppressive. And at that point, 1979, 1980, I thought I had to choose. Either a man is nice or he's oppressive. And then I suddenly saw, oh, well, actually, his niceness has nothing to do with it. It's just that he is a very good student of what he was taught in university, a very good student of what he was taught in university, and I was also, which is a kind of litany of 5 points or so. Men have knowledge. Men make more knowledge. Men publish and profess knowledge. Men run the best known research universities, and men run the best known university presses. And so the men have taken in, as I had too, that men are knowers and knowledge itself is male. And then I remembered the 17 million volumes in Widener Library by men, about men and women and people all over the world, but written by men. And then I thought, I fear that I remember that Black women in the Boston area had written essays in the late 70s. Actually, it was 1977 that the Combahee River Collective of Black women in the Boston area had written a statement that said, not in so many words, but basically meaning this: white women are oppressive to work with. White women are oppressive to work with. And I remembered back to my responses in 1980 when I first read their work. And I was remembering back to my first response, which was like a whine. It was, I don't see how they can say that about us. I think we're nice. And my second response, which is outright racist, but this is where I was in 1980. I thought, I especially think we're nice if we work with them. I thought back, I was mortified to realize I was expecting thanks for working with people that I had been taught to look down on. And did that make me oppressive to work with? Well, I didn't want to say yes. So I dithered over it for a couple of years. Was I oppressive to work with? I hope I was so nice that this covered up my condescension, my feeling that I should be thanked for working with these inferior people, Black women, scholars. And after a couple of years of dithering over that question, was I oppressive? I had to say, yes, I was. They could see my patronizing attitude. They forgave me because it looked as though I was trying. I was reading Black women's literature. I was even teaching Black women's literature. And so they gave me the benefit of the doubt, but they could see the underlying condescension. Then I thought, okay, I think I have to admit that I was taught a litany that's parallel to the male litany. It goes the same way. White people have knowledge. White people make more knowledge. White people publish and profess knowledge as professors. And white people run the main research universities, the best known research universities, and white people run the best known university presses. And we have taken in, and it's not our fault, we have been good students of it, we have taken in, we have learned that knowledge is white and that whites are knowers. And I realized I had, as we say now, internalized that conviction that as a white person, I was a knower and I had knowledge. So once I saw that really ugly parallel, I saw that niceness has nothing to do with it. We were just good students of this exclusive way of seeing. And then I said, oh, maybe that's why I'm getting funded. Every foundation I've ever applied to is run by whites, and I'm white. I had thought my Black colleagues in the building, 7 women, weren't getting funded because they didn't write good grant proposals. And now I thought, maybe their grant proposals were brilliant, but they weren't white. And then I realized I had the whole knowledge system on my side because all those 17 million, I had gone to Radcliffe, Harvard, all those 17 million books in the Harvard affiliated libraries written by men and written by white men buoyed my support from the knowledge system, that the knowledge system was saying, yeah, whites are knowers, and this white woman, you can fund her. As for these black women, maybe they don't know enough, maybe they don't have enough knowledge, but we can trust this white woman. She did well in college. We can trust her as a knower. And this was now shaking up my worldview, because I had thought I had everything that I had earned, that everything that had come to me was something that I had earned. This is called the myth of meritocracy, that you merit what you get. And I realized I had gotten extra money, attention, time, reputation by being white. And I hated feeling that I had been given these things that I didn't earn. And now I know I shouldn't have felt negatively about this. I should have named it, which I did, white privilege. And I should have examined more closely how our bigger systems work to make my kind of life easier than the life lived by those onto whom it isn't projected, that they are worthwhile, that they're excellent, they're as good as any of us, and so on. So I asked myself, rather unwillingly, what is it? What do I have except the knowledge system and the money system working for me? My conscious mind refused to answer the question, which was a shock to me. I'm used to asking my mind questions and having it answer back. It refused to answer, so I asked in several different ways. On a day-by-day basis, what do I have that I didn't earn except the knowledge system and the money system that put me here at the Wellesley Centers for Women with lots of money from foundations to do my seminars on bringing women into the curriculum. And my mind kept balking. And so I felt I was in a kind of spiritual crisis over this, that what I had thought had been individual excellence was in fact being rewarded because of an accident of birth, that I happened to be born white in a culture that favors whites. And I thought there must be more to the picture, but my mind wouldn't answer. So I went to bed one night shouting, I think. But my husband says I wasn't shouting, but I know I felt I was shouting. If I have anything I didn't earn, except the knowledge system and the money system working for me, by contrast with my black friends, show me. And in the middle of the night, the first example swam up, and it was the first of 46 examples that swam up in the middle of the night. And then, I'm sure you're well aware of this. We've all got a subconscious layer which knows things about our life and our experience and even our beliefs, but it doesn't always come to us. It's subconscious. So the thing that swam up was one sentence. I turned on the light. I wrote it down. I thought, this is trivial, but now I think it's huge. This was the example. I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. I looked at it again in the morning, and I continued to think it was trivial. But it is, in fact, huge in the sense that it keeps me from having to feel like the only or the lonely. Well, the next night, Another example swam up, and I have to laugh, of the 46 that swam up from the subconscious, got recorded by me and put into the paper you wrote, you read. By the way, the original list had 46. You probably read the paper that has just 26 examples. But in any case, they all came up in perfect English, and I'm an English teacher, and I didn't have to edit them. It's as though the subconscious mind knew how to say these things. I just didn't want to hear them. But I wrote them down as they came up, and I rarely had to discard one. Sometimes they were too exaggerated, and I had to discard them from the list. For example, I wrote, I can go from month to month without considering my race. Well, this isn't true, I realized, because I'm teaching Black women's literature. So I'm teaching it, now here's the rub, I was not teaching it with a view to the white culture that produced the Black lives that I was teaching about. But still, I wasn't yet thinking of myself as having a race. I was just teaching these excellent authors like Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou. And the number of subconscious volunteered examples that I had to actually discard was very small. So my subconscious knew this. Then a voice in me said, Peggy, you better write this down. You better publish this. This is probably the most important work you'll do in your lifetime. By now it was 1986. And so I took my paper. By the way, I need to ask here, did you all read the long paper, which has 46 examples, or the short one, which is 3 pages and has just 26 examples? Which did you read as a group?
Do you know, Jackie, offhand?
I think it was the shorter one.
I think it was the shorter one.
Yeah, about 3 pages, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I was giving talks, and people in departments were saying, can we use your paper in our courses in psychology, sociology, Black studies, women's studies, education, English? And I was saying, yes, if you pay a copyright fee for the 3-page paper of 50 cents per copy that you make. And universities were saying, fine, we'll send you a check, 50 cents a pop. And I made $20,000 the first year. And I took my paper to the Working Papers Committee and said, you can publish it on behalf of the centers as a whole, and you can charge $6 because that's what we bring in for a working paper. You can charge $6 for it. And the committee, my colleagues said, oh, we can't publish it. It has no footnotes. No footnotes. And I said, okay, I understand. We're a Center for Research on Women. We have to sound academic. And then it continued to sell like hotcakes this next year. And I took it back to the committee and said, you would make so much money for the centers as a whole if you would publish this. I recommend it. And it's being validated by the number of academic departments that are using it. They said they would take another look at it. And they said, we're sorry. We're sorry. We have this reputation to uphold for doing scholarship, and your paper is merely anecdotal. Anecdotal. So no, we can't publish it. So I continued to rake in money for giving my private copyright fee. And then about 3 months after I had finished the second meeting with the Working Papers Committee, the subconscious voice that had given me the examples woke me up again. And it said, Freud didn't have footnotes. Freud. Freud didn't have footnotes. So I went back to the committee and said, I understand about our reputation and this doesn't look like scholarship, but I just want to say this is original work. Freud didn't have footnotes. And they looked at each other, these people with PhDs in psychology and sociology and economics. They looked at each other like this. And they shrugged and they said, okay. And so they finally did publish it 2 years after it was done, and it's still our bestseller. Or actually, we've just like you in the AAUW in the villages today, you have had to forsake the print life and the in-person life. We at the Centers for Women have forsaken the print life, mailing copies to people who paid the fee, and now our working papers are all online and disappearing. In any case, it was major learning for me. And then the key, and my husband would say, as I would be seen, as he would see me writing at night, and that would wake him up, he would say, what are you writing? And I didn't have words for it. I just babbled. I said, it's not fair that nobody told, but I couldn't put it together what I was writing. And he woke up another time and asked, what was I writing? And I still couldn't say. And finally, dear man, he propped himself up in our bed on his elbow in his pajamas and said, tonight I'm really going to listen. What are you writing? And by then I knew I had put it together. It was a system that over-rewarded me. And I was going to write about it as white privilege. But instead of telling him that, I just said, Ken, I'm writing down things I don't want to know, and we can talk in the morning. And now I've given many talks to audiences which were feeling a fair amount of guilt for having white privilege. So I want to repeat what Linda said to you. The purpose of studying privilege systems is not to feel blame, shame, and guilt. It's okay to feel some anger that was kept from you, that the curriculum you were studying omitted women and omitted people of color, male and female. It's okay to feel some anger about that, but you're not to blame for being born into a system that benefited you without your having earned the particular benefit. And the key thing for me is, okay, having seen that I have power that I didn't really earn, but that I got because I was given the benefit of the doubt as a white person. What can I do with this power that might be useful? Now, you all in your series here are using your white privilege to do a serious discussion of race. You needn't do that. Nobody's forcing you. That is a wonderful use of white privilege to weaken the hold of white privilege. In the days when I went to college, what whites thought was worth studying was what got studied. It didn't include people of color. When I graduated from Radcliffe in '56, there was no African American studies, no Asian American studies, no Native studies, no Chicano, no Latino studies. Whites didn't think these were really worth studying. By having this study series yourselves, you're changing the view of what's worth taking seriously. And that's wonderful. Now, I'd like to have you go into breakout rooms, which are private, because you all carry a lot of knowledge. You're each an encyclopedia of knowledge about your life. The universities didn't let us think this way, but you are a walking encyclopedia of all the experience you've ever had. And some of it does have to do with having or not having power because of arbitrary circumstances of birth or of your unfolding circumstances of life in which you didn't play a major role. It just happened to you. What you are about to do is go into breakout rooms with others, a total of 5 per breakout room, in which you will have the chance to talk about some of your own experience of having 2 things. The first is unearned disadvantage in your life, and the second is unearned advantage in your life. And these needn't have anything to do with race or gender. They can if you wish, but I'm going to read some of the variables that you might consider. I believe everybody has a combination of unearned advantage in life and unearned disadvantage, and we didn't ask for these, so it's not about blame, shame, or guilt. So one of the things you can ask about your own life is, did I have anything that set me ahead or behind with regard to my family's income, with regard to my parents' formal education? Did it set me ahead or behind? In my mixture of unearned advantage and disadvantage, how about my ancestors' region of the world, my ancestors' nationalities? Was this a plus or a minus for me? Or both? Some will find as they talk in their small group that what you list as your disadvantage will end up being what you also list as your advantage, because circumstances can shift as we grow up from being one thing to another. What about your body type when you were a child? What about your hair, the look of your hair? What about the skin tone of your skin? What about your abilities or disabilities in learning, in sports? What about the language of your household when you were growing up? What about the ethnicity of your grandparents? Not race, but ethnicity, having to do with culture and food and customs of a region of the world. What about your parents' employment histories? The nature of them set you ahead or behind. Religion. Now, that's been so changeable as in the 20th century. you may find you can't think well about religion in relation to your life because of the shifting sands of religious commitment. But maybe you can see, oh yeah, I was put ahead. I was put ahead being raised by a Protestant. I had Protestant privilege. In New England, Protestant privilege carried quite a lot of weight. In Boston, it did. Protestant privilege, those who had Catholic upbringing, unless they had very supportive life in the 1950s, they were looked down on by many Boston Brahmins. What about your gender identity, which is this question? Did you feel that you belonged in the kind of body comfortably that you were assigned at birth? What you were born male or female, according to the pediatricians and obstetricians. Do you feel that what you were assigned to be did fit well? That means you had a secure gender identity. How about your sexual orientation? It could have been whether you had as your best friends or lovers people of your own sex, then that could have been a plus or a minus for you. My sister was a lesbian woman who greatly benefited in her life from finding that out. That made her life truly happy and fulfilled and productive and exciting. So in that case, her sexual orientation definitely was an advantage. What about your social class? What people projected onto the manners of your people? Could that have put you ahead or behind? What about your parents' relation to money? And then the rest of your family's relation to money? Do you feel that it put you ahead, put you behind? In any case, we're talking about arbitrary circumstances. And as I said before, you can't be blamed for being born into systems of evaluation and exclusion and inclusion that you didn't invent. They were just there and you were born into them. In your small group, this is the instruction I'd like to give you now for you to follow. First, this is a private group. Anything anybody reveals about their unearned disadvantages or advantages is private. It is not yours to spread around. Secondly, you should plan to talk for 1 minute on your unearned advantage. First of all, go around the circle. You'll have to hypothesize what the circle is in this digital world we're in. But go in order, 1 minute each to decision making. After you have each had 1 minute, by now we'll be up to the 6-minute mark, even though there are only 5 of you in the group. That's just my experience. Then please go around again and now talk about some form of unearned advantage that you've had that opened doors for you. Let's say you got a scholarship to college. You didn't invent the scholarship fund. You didn't fund it, but the college was able to give it to you. Or let's say you've traveled abroad and found that the dollar really stretches in many cultures of the world. And you didn't invent the economic system, but you benefit from it when you're traveling. English in airports of the world. If you have gone elsewhere, you will know that airports of the world, throughout the world, make it easy for English speakers because English is the lingua franca of the world. Not that we earned it, but that it makes life easier for us. That's an American privilege, to find that English is spoken around the world. And of course, all the other variables that I read having to do with hair and body type and income and parents' social class and so on and so forth, all of those could have worked to make your life, even if you were being abused as a child, still, if you were looking white, your teachers would assume that you could do the work in a way that they don't assume, we now know, looking at children of color. So I believe, to repeat, everybody has some unearned advantage and unearned disadvantage, and you are the sole authority on how that's worked in your life. So could we please now go?
If you are interested in doing that, participants, you need to raise your hand.
Your electronic hand.
Your electronic hand. We're not seeing any hands. People are not interested. Ah, here we go. Amy Latzer. Where are you, Amy?
I'm right here. Hi, good morning, afternoon for all of you. So thanks for having me. I wanted to share, and I shared this in our small group, but I really, like, as I said it, it really struck me. Early in my life, I would not have even known what white privilege meant. I just wouldn't have even occurred to me. You know, all of us kind of see like, oh, I had to fight for this and struggle through this and overcome this. But the truth is, Jackie knows this, I started working for an organization almost 14 years ago called 211, and we talked to the most vulnerable populations in their most vulnerable moments. And I would say 80% or more are not white. They kind of varying different backgrounds. And even beyond my white privilege, just so many privileges that I had that set me up for a much easier pathway in life. I never had to worry about having a roof over my head or having food on the table or clothes on my back. I never had to worry about not being able to pay for an education or, feeling safe physically in my home. And it really revealed to me just how much that early privilege that I just was not, there was no way for me to even know what that meant or recognize it at that stage of life, set me up for such just a well-earned career and pathway to make my life easier and then pave a way for my daughter. And, I think what's really beautiful now of what's happening is that our younger generation is learning really early on, if they have that privilege, and to not take that for granted and to share it with others when they can, and to at least recognize it. I think that's really important to recognize. I have this a little easier than other people, and it creates some compassion that may not have existed in other areas, at least in my life, that I would not have recognized. And so it's really amazing to me. It's very exciting that these kinds of conversations are happening at so many levels. It just wasn't even until I was much later in life that I could even know that I had it easy or even give it a thought. So that's.
Thank you. That's big. Thank you. Kathy Morton.
Hi, everybody. I want to say hi to Liz Schweers for another reason, real fast. I just want to thank Peggy. Peggy, that was a phenomenal piece that you gave us. I mean, it detailed everything that we're looking to understand so beautifully on so many different levels. And, I just wanted to share that I think all of us, Peggy, you may actually have more experience than anyone else because your awareness was raised at such a, so many decades ago, and yet you've been able to build on that, where at least for me, and I think a number of us here today, we're coming new to the party, so to speak. I mean, I have a little advantage from my faith background that extends back about 17 years, but still, I think, all of us are, just the fact that we have these open hearts, that we're here, that we're trying our best to learn what white privilege is. I mean, in and of itself, it's such a huge topic. It's so systemic. It's so undermining to every part of society, no matter what group we come from. The idea that as white people, we have a race, right? Because I think a lot of us didn't think of ourselves as belonging to a different group. We were the group, which in and of itself is so destructive to the potential within every human being. It's going to take us generations to reverse, to unlearn, but you know what? We're all taking beautiful steps today. And again, I just want to commend, our hosts and Peggy for all the phenomenal work and for allowing us to begin this journey together. Because by being open and honest, by becoming aware is obviously the first step. And it allows each of us to go out within our individual spheres of influence and coming from a place of grace and love to help the wider world to adjust to what can be a very shameful feeling, right? And Peggy, you framed it so beautifully. It's not about shame. It's just about, this is what it was, and here's where I am, and here's my little place that I can help all of us to move forward. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And Sobosinski is next.
Okay, thank you. With what we were talking about in our groups of advantages, disadvantages, growing up, I was born in 48, so by the time I went to college, women were still pigeonholed to what professions were open to us. So we could be a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary. And I didn't want to be a secretary. I wanted to go to the university. I became a nurse practitioner, but I often think about a lot of other fields I would have enjoyed if I thought there was an opportunity. I was a practical person, so I certainly wanted to get an education and go into a field where I would find work. And you can always find work as a nurse. But when I became a nurse practitioner, I had to convince other nurses that this was a valid advanced field. And as one of them said to me, I wouldn't take my relative to you. I'd make sure they see the doctor. So I'm really happy about the changes for women in having a lot more choices in of doing what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Lisa Beavers.
Hi.
Lisa, we've been running into each other at every meeting, thither and yon. That one the other night was quite powerful.
Yes.
Good to see you again.
Oh, thank you. It was an interesting group, and some of the ladies had to leave, and there was an aha moment with one of the ladies that I just wanted to, I won't say who it was, but just her explanation of what happened. She was married, and her husband took them to another country that was Polynesian, culture was different, and she decided to join the Peace Corps and to be a volunteer at a hospital, just as somebody who could learn. She wasn't trained in anything, but she was white. And all of the nurses started to defer to her because she was white and knowledgeable, that it caused so much disruption. She actually had to leave that position because she kept saying to them, please don't come to me, please, I'm not I'm here to be an assistant. But just because she was white, and I've had this since she said that, I just have had that on my mind, that just because of the color of the skin, they thought that she knew all. And as a disadvantage, one moment I've had was in a room full of people speaking another language, and I am the only one not understanding. And when you put yourself in that situation, you just have to try to get feedback by their reactions, their eyes, their, you know, the way they're, because you can't understand what's going on. And you can feel that, you know, in what other people from other cultures, those vulnerable, you know, people who don't have the language down, how do they get along in this world? And just one more comment. So many comments were made about women's understanding. They experienced it with men dominating their lives. And we have that in common with the racist acts going on. We can sympathize and empathize with people because we've had these other experiences where women don't feel counted, you know. So I just wanted to share those few things.
Thank you. Not seeing any additional hands up. Peggy, you want to do a few minutes, a minute or two to wrap up, and then we have our final words for next time, or what's your pleasure, Peggy?
Yes. I would like to thank those who participated in any way today. And I have found that studying privilege is transformative. It is a spiritual experience to be more clear about who and where you are. And we're doing the work now that was not done for us in school. Most schools avoid the subject of power, including the matter of the history of how our parents have been treated in their communities, the history of what was projected onto us as females with regard to what we could undertake to earn money, the limits placed. Those limits have to do with power, and schools so far have resisted teaching children to look for power, see how power operates. But the kids are up to it. Sixth graders are in a good position to understand my white privilege papers. They didn't have the word white privilege, I mean the phrase white privilege, but they constantly felt through the day, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. Why is this happening? This isn't fair. Or in my case, avoiding the playground because that's where the bullying boys were. And feeling this isn't right. I don't like school. I don't like school because it isn't fair. It isn't a fair place. I think it's wonderful that sixth graders are given the white privilege paper and are able to testify for themselves about what feels fair about school, what doesn't. When you ask children, where in the school do you feel safe? Often it turns out that it's in the custodian's office. The men, mostly men, who clean schools have an office, custodian's office. Kids feel safe there. Why? It's not graded. Their personalities are not graded. They're allowed to hang out and talk to the men who sweep the floors and mop the floors. That should tell us something about education as a whole. There's too much judgment, too much grading, too much blaming, and too much pedestalizing of the few who are seen as really worthy. Now, I have a personal comment to make to Morton. Her last name is Morton.
Kathy.
Can you unmute her?
Yeah.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi, I can't see you.
You can go into a gallery view.
It might be on the other page, Peggy.
Okay.
On the left and right of the screen, you can go to the other page.
Oh, okay. The whole concept is huge, but our souls are, as you indicated, our souls are huge too. And I see it as soul work to come into this kind of systemic seeing, which is filled with, so that's what was going on. So that's how I was raised. So this is what I could do. And it seemed to me you were speaking as though you were of the Baha'i faith. Are you?
Yes.
Now, isn't that interesting? Because
Wow.
I didn't know. You conveyed it in your view of the world.
Very cool.
Yeah. Now that is extraordinary. Of all the faiths in the world, I was able to pick up from her, and now she's gone off the screen again. What is Morton's first name?
Kathy.
Kathy.
I'm sorry, would you spell that?
Kathy.
Now, for those who don't think that studying this work can be redemptive, I would like to say I was afraid of going public with this work. That is, in the teacher development program that we lead, it's now 33 years old, and it prepares teachers to lead a year-long, rather like your discussion series here, a year-long monthly conversation on what are we teaching and why, and how can we make the content,
I know.
how can we make the curricular content and the teaching methods and the whole school environment such that every child wants to be in school. And one way for that is lessening the authority of the teacher and increasing the empowerment of children to tell about what they know, what they've been through, but without commenting for them on what they've revealed, letting them speak for themselves without debriefing. Now, I was afraid of bringing into that teacher work that we do the whole matter of race. And I feared, and I'll read you what I wrote in my book. By the way, this is my book. If you
Hold that on. Okay.
on privilege, fraudulence, and teaching as learning. When I came to write the book, I decided I'd better confess my fears of this whole subject. I feared loss of centrality in my own worldview, loss of self-esteem, loss of certainty, loss of confidence, loss of entitlement. People would start depriving me of things. Loss of power, loss of self-satisfaction, loss of self-respect, loss of pride, loss of a sense that I was superior, loss of a sense of having protection, loss of a sense of competence, and loss of the familiar psyche, the landscape of my psyche that I knew best. I feared I would lose all of that if I kept talking about race. But instead, I found that it vastly improved my quality of life and my quality of heart and my popularity to keep talking about race. It redeemed my life, and it's such a relief to stop being hated. It is such a relief to have people of color trust me the way they couldn't before. It has turned my life around. So, to Ati, I want to say thank you for seeing the hugeness of all this and taking it into your Baha'i spirit and not backing off in fear. I admire Baha'is because they don't preach, they comment in a way that is useful to the world. Now, you're running down in time and I must...
Yeah, we are. I want to thank you, and let me wrap this up very quickly by saying thank you to everyone for participating. I think this was a rich discussion and is moving us forward as we think about social justice in this country. A reminder of our next meeting will be September the 23rd, again at 10:30. And we will be dealing with the topic of anti-racism and reading some pieces and viewing some interviews with Ibram X. Kendi, who has written on this topic. So again,
I'm sorry, I want to emphasize that in this book, there's 6 essays on white privilege and how to use it to weaken the system that gave it to us. And to get to the book, what you do is Google Rutledge, Routledge, Rutledge, Peggy McIntosh, and that'll tell you all about the book. And you
Thank
can
you.
buy it. Right.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again so much for joining us. We will see you next month. And Dr. McIntosh, we can't thank you enough. We'll be in touch.
And
Good.
please, if you would, Peggy, if you would stay on just for a moment, I want to ask you a question just about a photograph. So if you would just, when everyone else goes, if you'd stay on, thank you. Can you, Linda?
Yes.
Okay. Take this, there we go. Great.